weather wasn't that bad, but on the way back from Cape Breton Island to Southampton, we did hit quite a violent storm, but by our standards we weren't used to it. And we had had some stormy patches before that, but this was quite a big one and really quite scary actually. And eventually we couldn't proceed against it. We just had to we put the headsails over one way and the tiny trysail we had the other way, and the ship steered itself, the boat steered itself at an angle to the waves, and the waves got bigger and bigger, and sometimes you were sort of 20 or 30 feet up in the air, sitting up in the bows, and then you'd go down into the trough and you'd see the sea piling up behind you, and the waves were about the size of cottages, I suppose, 20 or 30 feet high. It really was awe-inspiring, because when you were up, you could see waves going away for miles and miles, and there was quite a lot of moonshine, as it happened, so to illuminate the waves. But when you were down, the waves were piling up high in front of you, and I had to crawl around on the deck. I couldn't stand up because of the force of the wind. So that it was really very, very frightening, but you know, we kept at it, and in the end it all died down again and we were okay after about 24, 48 hours, something like that. My name is Colin Smith, and in 1958 I went sailing all around the North Atlantic as mate and doctor on an old boat under the Captain Christopher Ellis. Well, I'd done a lot of sailing with my father and my brother when I was younger, so I was quite keen to do that sort of thing. But I actually met these people at Radley College down the Thames from when I was at Oxford, and Christopher had already got the boat by then and had been using it as a training ship for the school kids there. And I knew he wanted to go take it on a serious sail, so I asked if I could join him.
My name is Celia Smith. I had left school. I'd done a secretarial course, but I didn't have a job, and I had an aunt who thought that I spent too much time with my head in a book, and she heard that the schoolmaster of her boys was going to go off on this expedition sailing across the Atlantic, and she thought it would be very good for me. So she took me to see him in Southampton, and he said we leave next week, and I said I can't possibly come next week, so he said never mind, come and join us in the West Indies.
Well, the most challenging thing for me was that I was going as doctor, and I'd only just qualified, and I was quite concerned about what I would do if anybody had got appendicitis in the middle of the Atlantic, because I knew we'd be out of sight of land and unavailable for any help. The opposite of that was the sheer delight of clambering around the rigging of this ancient pilot cutter, which was a delight and a joy.
Well, I was very excited. I'd never lived on a boat before. I'd spent the odd night, and it took a bit of getting used to. It's so different from the life I was used to, but most enjoyable. I went out on a cargo boat carrying bananas and met them in Antigua. Well,
this rest of the crew were schoolboys, really. They were a difficult bunch, actually. There were 3 or 4 of them. But they settled down in a quite extraordinary way, the discipline of the sea and having to handle an old-fashioned boat sort of made them grow up terribly quickly, and they became a very efficient crew in a short time. And we also had one delightful young woman. This was before I met Celia. Oh, I didn't think much of him when I first met Colin. He was very noisy,
and I felt he was showing off, probably because there was another woman there whom he rather fancied and he wanted to make an impression. So I thought, I don't think I'm going to get on with him. But time changes things, and I changed my ideas.
Oh, when we first met, I was actually still working on Barbados, in the Barbados General Hospital as a houseman. And I had no idea they were going to be there, so that they just arrived at my house. Chris, the skipper, had allocated my house for them to go to, but he hadn't told me. So I just got up one morning and found Celia and her cousin Anne sitting out there having some breakfast, I think. And as far as I recall, I was stark naked, because I remember rapidly putting a tablecloth around myself so as not to embarrass myself, because these two totally strange young women turned up in my house. I was somewhat in love with some totally different person at that time, so I didn't see her really as a potential girlfriend or anything to start with. She was just a sort of irritation, really. And she found me equally irritating, if I remember rightly. But there's nothing like the discipline of a ship. Suddenly there was a whole routine that we had to fit into. Now, part of that routine was when we were on watch together, and everybody else was either asleep or reading a book or something. And that's a marvellous way of getting to know somebody, especially at night, because you're completely relaxed sitting in the cockpit, steering the boat, watching the compass, and just talking and talking and talking. To me, it was absolutely, I don't know how to express it, a fundamental sort of experience. But we were, I would say, I was certainly constantly anxious that something terrible might happen, might go wrong. But as a result of all this, we got to know each other extremely well, and it stood us in such good stead that I sometimes think that everybody should do it, because it's where most people seem to meet their future spouses at parties or something when they're not like themselves at all. But we were very much had to be our personal selves, and we were in a lot of contact.
I was thinking back on it, I was quite surprised how encouraging my parents were. Perhaps they wanted to get rid of me, but it must have been an anxious time for them, because they didn't know the skipper or the boat, and it was there was danger. And in those days, of course, if you got into trouble, it was much more difficult to get help than it is now. We didn't all have sat-navs and mobile phones even.
I think we were both bolder, if you see what I mean, more self-assured for it, because we'd done it and we were home and we were alive, and we'd had a sort of absorbing and very exciting experience.
I sometimes think of what would have happened to me if I hadn't gone on Theodora. And who knows, I suppose I expected to work for a few years and then get married and have children, which is in fact what happened, but somehow the Theodora episode did make a big difference, did teach you about yourself as well as other people. And yeah, I wouldn't have missed it.
At the time, I was desperate to get back to my medical training or my career as a doctor, and so we didn't see much of each other until I was sent to Basuto Land to be a medical officer in a mountain region, and then I just suddenly realised I was terribly lonely and that I had very little idea how to look after myself. And so I wrote to Celia and said, "Will you come and marry me?" But that was several months later, wasn't it, after the sailing experience?
A
few months, yes.
Quite quickly. And I wondered what to do about this totally unexpected letter. And in the end I decided to say yes. And so a few weeks later I travelled out, and you were ill when I arrived, weren't you?
Yes, I had a high fever when she arrived and I couldn't even smile at her.
But it didn't last, fortunately.
No.
We haven't quite reached our diamond wedding yet, but we're well past our golden.